Good morning, students. Today we will learn about the intestinal motility, that is both the small intestine and large intestine. The learning objectives of today's topic are functions of intestinal motility, the general principles of gastrointestinal functions, various types of small intestinal motility, which is very important both for theory and practical viva, and intestinal reflexes and their functions, and the types of large intestinal motility, and then defecation reflex. So this is also very important. And lastly, applied aspects. So we will see each of these objectives. So before going into the various types of this intestinal motility, we need to know the basic function or purpose of having this intestinal motility. So the basic function or the purpose of this motility is to mix the chyme with the digestive secretions of the pancreas, bile, and then the small intestine and large intestinal secretions, and then to bring this fresh chyme into contact with the absorptive surface of microvilli. So after mixing the food with the digestive secretions, it has to be absorbed. So the nutrients from the food has to be absorbed. So it will be, these movements will bring the food or mixed chyme into contact with the absorptive surface of microvilli. You all know that intestine is having, small intestine is having the microvilli. So which will be absorbing the nutrients from the food. And lastly, to propel the chyme or the unabsorbed food material towards the colon, that will be excreted as feces. Okay, so this is the basic function of the intestinal motility. The general principles of gastrointestinal functions. So here you need to know that small intestine is the very largest part of the total gastrointestinal tract. That is, it accounts to 3/4 of the whole length of the GIT, which amounts to 600 centimeters in length. So the small intestine is having all the layers which we have seen in the introduction part of the GIT. All the 3 layers are present, and especially the muscularis part, muscularis externa, is having the outer longitudinal and inner circular muscles. So that is very well developed in small intestine. So this small intestinal motility is it plays a very important role or crucial role in the whole GI motility. So the 3 layers of smooth muscles of intestine will act as a functional syncytium, which will be helping in the normal functioning of the GI motility. So we will see the functional types of GI movements. The first one is propulsive type of movement, which is again having the contraction ring type of movement and receptive relaxation type. And then the mixing type of movements. In this mixing type, we have peristaltic contractions and local constrictive contractions. So there will be propulsive and mixing type of functional movements present in the gastrointestinal tract. So now specifically we will see the small intestinal motility. So we can divide the small intestinal motility into 3 parts. So first one, during interdigestive period, that is between the digestion time. So after lunch there will be digestion taking place, and after that there will be some time for the gastrointestinal tract till the next arrival of food. So between the lunch and dinner there will be interdigestive period, and during that time there are specific types of movements. And then during the digestive period, that is immediately after taking the food, so the digestion process begins, and during that period there will be different types of movements. And lastly, the reflexes assigned with the intestine. During the interdigestive period, the type of the intestinal motility is called migrating motor complex, or in short form MMC. So these migrating motor complexes are the peristaltic waves or the strong propulsive contractions, which will be beginning at esophagus or the stomach, and then it will be continuing throughout the intestine till the last part of the ileum. So when it reaches the distal end of the ileum, next immediate uh, migrating motor complex will begin at esophagus or the stomach. So this process will be repeated. during the interdigestive period. So because of this repeated movement in the interdigestive period, whatever the food is remaining which is undigested and unabsorbed, that will be swept off. That is, it will be like sweeping with a broom. The dust whichever is present on the floor, when we sweep it off, it will be clean, right? So with this type of migrating motor complex movement, the undigested and unabsorbed food will be completely swept off into the colon. So because of this reason, this migrating motor complex in the small intestine is called interdigestive housekeeper or housekeeper of the small intestine. Okay, so this migrating motor complex is very important short question for you in the theory exam. So the rate of this MMC is regular 5 centimeters per minute, and it appears every 60 to 90 minutes. So in this time, the motor complex which has begun at the esophagus or stomach, it will be taking this much time to reach the end of the small intestine. So close correlation is present between the basic electrical rhythm and migrating motor complex, and it is associated with increase in gastric secretion, bile flow and pancreatic secretion, and it is abolished immediately with the entry of food. Okay, so this will be taking place only in the interdigestive period, or when the digestion process is not taking place, because during the digestive period the movements will be some other type. So that we will see in the next slide. During the digestive period, there will be mixing type of movements, propulsive type of movements, and the villi movements. The mixing type of movements are responsible for mixing of chyme with the digestive juices, that is intestinal secretion, bile, and then pancreatic secretions. So these include segmental contractions and pendular movements. So this is a picture of segmental contraction. So the movement will be like segmenting the intestine into different parts, okay, like segments you can see in the picture, right? So this is segmental contraction. So the features of the segmental contractions are, these are most common regular type of movements which are rhythmical, and the small segment will contract and adjoining segment will relax. Alternate contracted and relaxed segment will be giving a ring-like appearance. Okay, so see in the picture, when one segment is contracted, the remaining segment or the adjacent segment will be relaxed. So because of this, a ring-like appearance will be seen. So the function of this segmental contraction is to slow down the transit time and increase contact time with the absorption. It will also help in propelling the chyme slowly towards the colon. Okay, so the segmental contractions are very common and are regular and rhythmical. And the rate and duration of these segmental contractions are 12 times per minute in duodenum and 8 times per minute in ileum. And there are of two types, eccentric lesser than 2 cm and concentric longer than 2 cm in length. And these segmental contractions are controlled that they will be initiated when only the slow waves are produced, like spikes or action potentials are produced. Only that time these segmental contractions will be initiated, and the frequency is directly related to the frequency of slow waves and controlled by the pacemaker cells of the GI tract. The strength of these segmental contractions is proportional to the frequency of spikes generated by the slow waves. And next type of movement during the digestive period are pendular type of movements. These are small constrictive waves which sweep forward and backward or upward and downward in pendular fashion. Okay, so you know the pendulum, right? So it will be moving to and fro, or you can take or represent that movement in up and down fashion also. So the small constrictive waves which sweep or move forward and backward or upward and downward in a pendular fashion. And then the next type of movement is propulsive type. It is involved in pushing the chyme towards the ab-oral end. So oral is the oral cavity side and ab-oral is towards the last part, that is the rectum and anal canal. So this propulsive type of movements are involved in pushing the chyme, the food part material, towards the ab-oral, that is towards the rectum and anal canal. So these include peristaltic contractions and peristaltic rush. So the first type, peristaltic contractions. These are the wave of contraction preceded by wave of relaxation. These are highly coordinated, involve contraction of segment behind bolus and relaxation in front. It consists of deep circular ring at the rate of 0.5 to 2 cm per second. So chyme will move at the rate of 1 cm per minute, so 3 to 4 hours from pylorus to ileocecal valve. So it is calculated according to the length of the intestine, that is from pylorus stomach part to the ileocecal valve. It will take 3 to 4 hours. So this peristaltic contractions you have already seen in the migrating motor complex. So peristaltic, this type of movements will be uh, present during the interdigestive period, but that will be called as migrating motor complex. Okay, so don't get confused because this picture you have seen in that slide also. So this is peristaltic contractions which are present during the digestive period as a part of propulsive movement. And then the migrating motor complex is different. So it is the peristaltic contractions which are taking place during the interdigestive period. Okay, so any remaining or absorbed food that will be swept off from the intestine towards the colon. Okay, so that is during the interdigestive period will be called as MMC. But during the digestive period, this type of peristaltic contractions will be taking place in the propulsive type of movements. So the functions of these peristaltic contractions are propelling food towards the ab-oral end and the digestion and absorption of the nutrients. And then these contractions are controlled by initiating the stimulus. Initiation of these contractions are the stimulus distension, that is distension of the intestine by myenteric reflex, and the rate of movement of these contractions are 2 to 2.5 centimeters per second. So if we see in a flowchart form, the local stretch, that is the myenteric reflex, causes the release of serotonin neurotransmitter which activate the sensory neurons, and that will stimulate the myenteric plexus. So the activity of this action potential or the signal will travel in either direction to release the ACH and substance P, which help in the circular constriction of the intestine, and then the nitric oxide, vasointestinal peptide, and then ATP will be helping in receptive relaxation of the intestine. So the alternate constriction and relaxation will be taking place. So this is the picture showing the release of serotonin when in response to local stretch, which helps in again releasing of the ACH, so which is a stimulatory neuron. So it will be causing the muscarinic receptors to get activated and the smooth muscle will be contracting. So the other transmitters, which are NO, nitric oxide and VIP, will cause relaxation, receptive relaxation. So next type of movement is peristaltic rush. It is very powerful peristaltic contractions which will be more stronger than the normal peristaltic contraction. So this type of peristaltic rush will be present when there is a irritant food present in the intestines. So it is partly initiated by extrinsic nervous system and also by some part by myenteric reflex, that is enteric nervous system. It begins in duodenum through the entire length up to ileocecal valve, and this type of rush will be relieving the small intestinal from its irritant, or the relieving from the extensive distension which is present because of the irritant. So the most common example for this peristaltic rush is none other than the diarrhea. The next type of movement are villi movements. It consists of alternate shortening and elongation of the villi by contraction and relaxation of muscles. So the initiation for this villi movement are local nervous reflexes and also villi-kinin, which is a specific hormone which is released from the small intestinal mucosa. So the functions of this villi movement is that it helps in emptying the lymph from central lacteal system into the lymphatic system. So emptying of lymph from the central lacteal into the lymphatic system is the main function of this villi movement, and it also increases the surface area of absorption. The law of intestine. So this is also very important short question, very short question. So it is proposed by Stalling in 1901, and this is also called the synonyms for this law of intestine are polarity of intestine, polar conduction of intestine, electrical activity of intestine, or the law of gut, or the theory of receptive relaxation. So it states that the peristaltic contraction travels from the point of stimulation in both the direction, but contraction in oral direction disappears and persists in the aboral direction. Okay, so the point of stimulation, the contractions will be spreading or appearing in both the directions, but the contractions which are in oral direction will be disappearing and the contractions towards the aboral direction will be persisting. So this is the law of gut or law of intestine. So because of this reason only, the food will be, or the chyme will be propelled towards the rectum and anal canal, and the food will be, as the food is going through the intestine, there will be absorption of the nutrients taking place. So there are two types of intestinal motility reflexes. So one is gastroileal reflex and other is intestinal reflex. So the first one, gastroileal reflex, is initiated when the food enters the stomach, that is distension of stomach by food, and this causes the motility of terminal part of ileum, which will be enhanced, and the ileosphincter will be relaxed. Okay, so this will be mediated by the reflex stimulation of vagus. When the food is distended in the stomach, there will be stimulation of vagus, which will cause relaxation of ileocecal sphincter. So this increases the entry of food contents of the ileum into the colon. Because the ileocecal sphincter has relaxed, the food will be entered into the colon. And then the intestinal reflex, there will be a part of the or the segment of intestine will be over distended and the rest of the intestine will be relaxed. So this is mediated by local enteric neurons and some vagovagal pathways. Okay, so in intestinal reflex, one part will be over distended and the remaining part of the intestine will be relaxed. In the applied aspects of small intestinal motility, we have paralytic ileus and intestinal obstruction. So what are these? We will see now. So paralytic ileus is also called adynamic ileus. So the basic pathophysiology in this condition is the intestinal motility is markedly decreased, leading to retention of contents. There will be irregular distension of small intestine by pockets of gas and fluids. So the cause for this type of adynamic or paralytic ileus is the direct inhibition of smooth muscle of small intestine due to handling of the intestine, like during the intra-abdominal operations or surgery, and then during trauma. So because of manual handling of the intestine, there will be direct inhibition of the smooth muscle of the small intestine, and also reflex inhibition due to increased discharge of noradrenergic fibers in the splanchnic nerves. So these are the causes for paralytic or adynamic ileus. And then the intestinal obstruction or intestinal colic. So this is because of tumors, strictures and fibrotic bands in the abdomen. So the features of this intestinal colic are severe pain due to peristaltic rush. So the peristaltic rush is present when there is irritant in the intestine. So the irritant will be maybe tumor, stricture or fibrotic bands. So because of that there will be severe pain and distension of small intestine due to increased intraluminal pressure. There will be local ischemia, and that is ischemia is loss of blood supply to that part, and then sweating, hypotension and severe vomiting due to stimulation of visceral afferent nerves. And when obstruction in the upper part of small intestine is present, there will be anti-peristaltic reflux which causes intestinal juices to flow into the stomach. Okay, so that is reverse peristalsis. When obstruction in the upper part of the small intestine, there will be vomiting which becomes more basic than acidic because of the intestinal juices which are basic in nature. So now we will move into the large intestinal motility. So basically in the large intestine there will be slow wave activity which is again coordinated by basic electrical rhythm or slow wave activity. The frequency of this slow wave activity gradually increases down the large intestine. So 9 per minute at the ileocecal valve to 16 per minute at the sigmoid colon. This is the number of the slow waves which are occurring per minute. And the functions of these large intestine movements are absorption of water and electrolytes from chyme. So absorption of the water is the main important function of the large intestine, and storage of fecal matter at the distal part of the large intestine. And contractile activity serves two main functions, that is increasing the efficacy of absorption and promoting excretion of fecal matter. The types of large intestinal motility are the main one, Haustral shuttling and peristaltic type of contractions, and also the mass peristaltic movements. So Haustral shuttling are similar to segmental contractions which you have seen in small intestine. So there will be circular muscle contractions forming the circular rings, and the haustra are formed in between the circular rings. Okay, so these haustra will become more prominent in these type of contractions. So the longitudinal muscle contractions and the portion between the rings bulge in a bag-like sac called haustrations, and these will be disappearing within 60 seconds. And the functions of these haustrations or haustral shuttling type of movement is mixing of food and propulsion of food towards the colon. So this progressive, next is peristaltic type of movement. These are progressive contractions preceded by receptive wave of relaxation. This is very slow movement, peristaltic type of movement, which takes up to almost 42 hours to travel up to the colons, because the movement transit time in the ascending colon is 6 hours and transverse colon is 8 hours, and descending and pelvic colons, that is sigmoid colons, it's almost 12 hours. So from pelvic colon to rectum again it is very slow, which may even take 1 to 2 days. So that's why it will take this long time for the movement to take place in the large intestine. And the mass movements, which are very important type of movements in the large intestine, these are special types of peristaltic contractions which are seen in colon only. It takes place 3 to 4 times a day after a meal. And contraction of smooth muscle over large area distal to the constriction. So this is the important point. The contraction of the smooth muscle will be taking place over a large area. That's why it is called mass movement. It involves a larger area. Forces the fecal matter into the rectum, which initiates the defecation reflex. It can be initiated by gastrocolic reflex and intense stimulation of parasympathetic nerves, and also over distension of the segment of colon. So these are the initiating points for the defecation reflex. Okay, so haustral shuttling or haustral contractions and peristaltic type of movements and mass movements are the types of large intestinal motility. And now we will see the defecation reflex in brief. So the act of defecation involves both voluntary and reflex activity. The reflex contraction of distal colon and rectum will propel the fecal matter in the anal canal, and there will be reflex relaxation of internal anal sphincter. So the reflex relaxation with voluntary control of external anal sphincter and also voluntary contraction of the abdominal muscles will cause the defecation to take place. So the events associated with defecation are distension of rectum. Usually rectum is empty as frequency of contractions is greater in rectum than in the sigmoid colon, leads to retrograde movements of the fecal materials. So usually the rectum will be empty. But the gastrocolic reflex pushes the feces into rectum, which increases the intrarectal pressure passively. So there will be two types of reflexes. One is intrinsic and one is spinal cord reflex. So the intrinsic reflex is mediated by the intrinsic nerve plexus in the rectum and anal canal. And there will be when the rectum is distended, which initiates the efferents through the myenteric plexus, which initiate peristalsis in the descending colon, sigmoid colon and rectum. So because of increased rectal pressure, there will be relaxation of the internal anal sphincter leading to defecation. And in the spinal cord reflex, there will be when the rectum is distended, the efferents will pass through pelvic nerves to the sacral part of spinal cord, and there will be reflex parasympathetic discharge and pelvic splanchnic nerves to cause intense peristaltic contractions. The rectal pressure again increases to above 55 mmHg, causing the relaxation of internal and external anal sphincter, and finally the act of defecation. So these are the two kinds of reflexes present or associated with the defecation. And lastly, the applied aspect of defecation. In infants, there will be automatic emptying of lower bowel without voluntary control. And in individuals with spinal cord transection or spinal cord when it is cut into half or hemisection, initially there will be retention of feces. And later the reflex returns quickly as the rectal pressure reaches 55 mmHg. Reflex evacuation occurs automatically. And when we see the role of dietary fiber, so dietary fiber is very important of the large intestine motility. So it increases the bulk of feces and plays a very important role in distending rectum. So usually this dietary fiber is advised in cases of constipation. So lastly, the applied aspect of large intestinal motility. So in that, Hirschsprung's disease or aganglionic megacolon. So this is very important. It may come as a short question. So the reason for this disease is congenital absence of Auerbach's plexus in the wall of rectosigmoid colon. So the congenital absence of Auerbach's plexus, that is a part of enteric nervous system in the wall of rectosigmoid colon. Because of that absence of this innervation, there will be blockage of peristaltic and Morse type of movements in the large intestine, which leads to dilatation of the colon. Because the movements are not present, there will be accumulation of food material in the colon, leading to dilatation. And the treatment of this condition is simply cutting the aganglionic portion of pelvic rectal junction and anastomosing, that is rejoining the cut ends. So that is the surgical treatment of aganglionic megacolon or Hirschsprung disease. And other applied aspect is constipation, that is failure of voiding of feces. This is because of infrequent mass movements in colon. Feces remain in colon for longer time. So basically the colon transit time itself is very large, that is it takes 1 to 2 days, and in spite of or on above that there will be because of the infrequent mass movements there will be storing of food material in the colon for longer time, which becomes hard and dry due to fluid absorption. The water whatever fluid is there, that will be completely absorbed. So the food part, undigested part, which is staying in the colon for that longer time, becomes hard and dry. So this still contributes more to the uh, failure of movements or infrequent mass movements in the colon, which will be the cause for constipation. So the main reason is irregular bowel habits, which is the which leads to infrequent mass movements. So this is a picture of Hirschsprung disease, which is most commonly seen in infants. This is a normal picture and this is the diseased picture. So you can see that dilatation of the rectosigmoid colon part because of the absence of Orbach's plexus in this region. So the treatment will be cutting and anastomosing the cut ends. So that's all for today. I hope you understood the topic, small and large intestinal motility. So read the topic from the textbook, and the assignment for today is write down the various types of small intestinal motility with the diagrams. Okay, so thank you all.